Hosted by Justice General Radford. With special guest Zach Vaughn, Editor-in-Chief at Buffalo Fanatics Multimedia Network. Brian Alverson, genius behind the Reddit Bills Twitter account.
I'm gonna show you how great I am.
Well hit ball, there it goes. Number 350 for Junior.
I just hope I make my guys proud, and that's all that matters to me.
Everybody wants to know what I would do if I didn't win. I guess we'll never know.
What's going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to Justice for All. I don't even know what episode this is, but of course, this is a continuation from the Windshield Factor. So let's just call it somewhere in the 50s or something. I'll take a look later. But tonight we have a really, really cool special guests. A few really, really cool special guests. Obviously, my typical day of recording is Monday. Due to some, scheduling conflicts, we had to make it happen Sunday. And, my guys were able to make it happen. So I appreciate them for being able to come through. Obviously, both of these guys are going to be joining us tonight. First up, I'm going to introduce this guy who really, since I entered the Bills community, well, both of them have kind of, they've been honestly in the same boat as far as just guys who I really like interacting with. They were real huge Twitter presences, for me getting started in the Bills community, and two guys that I'm really happy to call friends. I have the editor-in-chief at Buffalo Fanatics Multimedia Network, Mr. Zach Vaughn, as well as, like I said, the genius behind Reddit Bills account. I love that account, Mr. Brian Alverson.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
guys
for
for
having
joining.
me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys for joining us tonight. What's going on, Zach? How you doing, bro?
I'm good. I'm very excited to dive into some of these prospects that I've been hearing about from the combine based on them running in spandex shorts with no pads on
Right.
for 40 yards. But no, in all seriousness, I mean, draft season's upon us. Everyone's got their favorites or coming out with who they want the Bills to take, who we want the Bills to take, and how we're all going to be eventually hurt by Brandon Beane.
Really? Wow. I mean, I guess we'll see. Brian, what's going on, man? How are you doing?
Doing pretty well. Spring's starting to hit the air, so I'm feeling more energetic, ready for the draft. There must be something in the water in Indy because they're all, like you said, running crazy this year.
Yeah.
I've seen them so fast before. It's
New class of
constantly record-breaking, but
superheroes.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Absolutely. So Zach, how do you get into the mind? Because I said this last week. I was having a little bit of trouble with like getting into the mind frame to go and look at college film and take a look at these guys, especially when you don't know who is going to be picked. Like that, I found last year obviously was my first year doing this, and that was the most draining part. Is every single person I looked at, the Bills didn't pick any of those players. So now I'm like, I don't even know who to look at or if they're going to get picked. Like, what's your thought process going into draft season?
I mean, also, I should preface this by I'm not the biggest college football guy. Like, for me, Saturdays are just another day at my actual job. But except for Army football, because I like having a little bit of wishbone offense to counteract the air raid Allen on Sundays. So that's always fun. But getting into the draft frame of mind, for me, it kind of starts with like the Senior Bowl, because all the big prospects show up at those bowl games, those exhibition games. You kind of hear about who gets buzz in practice, who does well, who breaks out, kind of like Quinn Meinerz last year, who was my guy. And again, that was like you said, falling in love with players, them not being taken by your team, especially when they got right past their 3rd-round pick. Though I will say I love Spencer Brown. I'm not mad that they took him over Quinn Miners. I'm just mad that the Bills didn't take Quinn Miners at all. But
Who would you rather have? Yeah, we all know it was Quinn.
it's gonna be Spencer Brown. Like,
really?
love the guy.
You would rather have
I'm
Spencer
just
over
saying-
Quinn?
I'm just saying the fact that they took him,
Mhm.
it makes me think that evidently the way he played this year and what he showed me that he is the future at right tackle for them.
Mhm.
As for Quinn Miners, he will be an all-pro. I am fully convinced of that. I am rooting for him. I'm proud to announce that I have been followed by him on Twitter.
Awesome.
That
I mean, you
makes
deserve
me
it. You were,
I-
definitely hyped him up.
I know it only took a year, but little too late to get him on the Bills unless free agency comes around in like 3 years. So I guess I'll be starting that campaign soon.
Yeah, we always need some dogs. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, finish.
But getting into that, so yeah, I use those exhibition bowl games to sort of start scratching around like who's getting the buzz and who might be worth taking a look at. Like last year from the Senior Bowl, I remember seeing Quentin Morris play in the Senior Bowl. He made a couple nice grabs. So then I took a look at him. I got more interested in him. And ultimately, even though I didn't mock him, I was happy to see that the Bills actually signed him as an undrafted rookie, and he stuck on the practice squad. And now he's on a futures deal. Who knows? Maybe he surprises and makes the roster. But so using those for me just to get a few names on a list, go look back at some of their film, look at some of the stuff that other people have written about them, just get a lot of research, try to find common denominators about them, figure that stuff out. Unfortunately, I haven't had much of a chance to do any of that this year because of my pesky day job, but it's just, yeah, just getting down into it, finding some guys, and then going from there.
Yeah, I mean that's all you really can do. I mean, there's like literally hundreds of these guys, if not maybe a thousand, a few thousand. Like it's a lot, and you don't necessarily even know where to start. Like typically in Bills past, you probably would want to start high because we got like a top 10 pick. But now we're all the way in like the 20s somewhere. Like I don't know who they're gonna pick, like who's gonna be available on the board. It's kind of hard to predict. What about you, Brian? I know your Twitter account, first of all, is one of my favorite accounts on Twitter. You go through, year round, you talk about different teams and you root for different organizations, but you are consistently like Bills Mafia type of thing, right? How do you prepare for draft season? Is that something that you really like dive into?
Yeah, I sort of do. I tend to, for starters, I think you have to go into it with the mindset of separating your own like personal preferences when you're looking at prospects versus what you think Brandon Beane will do. So you don't get into the habit of like, I really like this guy, and then
I'm
Brandon Beane
really
doesn't
bad at
take him.
that.
Yeah, I'm pretty bad at that too, because it's hard to do because he'll get into some trends where you think he's drafting certain types of guys, and then all of a sudden it's like, bam, he drafts Spencer Brown out of the blue, and you're like, now you don't know how to predict what he's going to do next. But yeah, I tend to I really like using the Draft Network resources. Joe Marino's really great. At first I didn't realize he was a Bills fan. So I was reading all his content like, this guy's so great. And then he started talking about the Bills, and I was like, oh my God. Yeah, and I don't like dive in super deep because in order to do that, it's like basically a full-time job. But if I get interested in a prospect, I'll look up some film on them and just kind of see what I think and what the general trends are and what direction I think the team is going to go in, just based on their needs, and just try to keep it open-minded, really.
Have you gotten a chance to look at any prospects for this upcoming draft?
Not a whole lot yet. I don't tend to get into it this early because free agency changes so much. But I've messed around with a couple mock drafts and read up on some guys. I mean, I have notoriously have a love affair with the Minnesota Golden Gophers this year because they have Daniel Falele and Boya Mafe, a couple other guys that are just like gigantic, super physical players, which I love.
That's
I
what
don't
Zach
think we're gonna.
loves.
I don't think we're gonna draft any of them, but I would be really happy if we did. So that's probably the most attention to a school that I've paid.
I think that ended up happening would be kind of the closest thing I can think of, at least to like my guy Jake Jordan. His the school he goes to is not necessarily his alma mater yet, but he goes to UCF, and he obviously has been there a couple of years, and he followed Gabriel Davis when Gabriel Davis was there, and so he was a Bills fan, and then he's like, oh wow, like the wide receiver who for this team that went undefeated, the wide receiver was the best receiver on his team, and he goes to my favorite team. And then not to mention he balls out. That was a pretty cool moment for him. So, hey, maybe we get some strong physical guys, coming to Buffalo from Minnesota. Zach, have you seen any prospects this upcoming, draft that you are interested in at all?
A couple I can think of off the top of my head probably are what most people have already out there said, but like Jordan Davis, obviously, I think after his combine performance, he's probably not getting past Detroit at number 2. I'm sure Dan Campbell would love to use him to bite kneecaps into oblivion. Travis Jones from UConn is, I think, a more reasonable option for the Bills, maybe in the second round.
Is he a defensive tackle?
He's also a defensive tackle. He's also a big boy, hog molly, one tech that I think the Bills could really use. And from all accounts, he did really well at the combine as well. Showed some athleticism, not to the degree of Jordan Davis, but nobody could have shown it to the degree of Jordan Davis. I also like that Tariq Woolen from UTSA. He's got the size and the length that the Bills seem to covet in an outside corner. He's 6'4", 200 something. But then he ran a 4.3 140, and I immediately realized he probably won't get out of the top 15. Who knows, though? Wishful thinking, right?
I mean, that's why. Then again, you never know. But I mean, even if that does happen, it's not like the Bills are going to take him. I look at. For me, it was DK Metcalf. Like when we were up to pick. First of all, I was like, oh, Ed Oliver is still there. Okay, let's take Ed Oliver. I'm fine with that, right? And then like our next pick passed, and I'm like, oh my God, we're about to get DK Metcalf. And then they just picked, what did they pick? Cody Ford?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That was such a weird series of events. Because they traded up to get him too.
Right.
And it was like, oh, what are they going to do? They're going to do something great. And
because when they traded up, I thought DK was coming, and they got Cody Ford. And then last year, obviously, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, I was like, he's right there. And,
or Creed Humphrey. Yeah.
I mean, there was a couple guys there. There's a couple guys who I really wanted. So sometimes it's it's kind of like you never know what Brandon Beane's gonna do, just because I guess you never really. But to be fair, again, I always say I won't doubt Brandon Beane until he gives me a reason to, and he's not even giving me close to a reason, to doubt him thus far. So
definitely,
I still believe, and I'm going to trust the process. But let's get into the main topic of the show. Well, first of all, let's say what's up to Buffalo Blitzkrieg in the house. Appreciate the love and support. Core players, okay? So Buffalo Bills, let's just paint a picture for the ladies and gentlemen, right? 5 years ago, young bald coach, by the name of Sean McDermott is signed to Buffalo Bills, and people are like, who the hell is this guy? Like, we're tired of getting these no-name coaches that no one's ever heard of, coming to Buffalo to get their first opportunity to coach just so they can flame out and then whatever, right? That's what I thought, at least. I know a lot of people kind of echoed those sentiments. And, of course, he came and was like the best thing that's ever happened to us outside of Marv Levy, right? So, which I've never experienced. So it's the best thing that ever happened to me as a Bills fan. shifts the entire organization. He gets his running mate with Brandon Bean. They go get their guy, Josh Allen. And 5 years later, we're here as one of, if not the best team in the league, right? Presumptive Super Bowl favorites, either one or two. Pretty much
I think we're
probably
tied
will be.
with Kansas City right now for the betting odds.
And it'll probably be that way, either
For the whole
fluctuating,
year. Mhm.
exactly. So we have drafted a few players, right? We have also traded for a few players. Who are the core players on this Buffalo Bills roster that are going to be the key to whether or not we can win a Super Bowl, right? So core players, meaning this is a guy who is going to be here no matter what, right? This is an untouchable, non-tradable, like this is a guy who is going to represent the Buffalo Bills 4 years to come, no matter what, right? So let's start with Brian. Let's hear your core players.
Yeah, you made a great point. When I think about core players, I think about if all the coaches and all the front office just rode off into the sunset today and we brought in a whole new coaching staff, who are the players that they would, keep no matter what scheme changes or whatever happened. And I have a list of positions that I think about. Offensively, quarterback, obviously, it's the most obvious one. Top wide receiver. I think nowadays you could even make an argument that wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 fall into that category, but I'll just stick with one. Your top stud wide receiver who can beat coverage for you consistently. Both tackles and your center. A lot of people wouldn't count center. I think nobody appreciates the center until he's gone. And if you remember what happened, we went from Eric Wood to Ryan Groy at center.
Oh Lord!
I think that's super important. So offensively, those are the positions I look at as core players.
I mean, for the Bills specifically.
For the Bills, yeah. So for the Bills specifically, it would be Josh Allen, Diggs, Dion, Spencer Brown.
Spencer Brown has now made the list of core players now?
I think so, yeah. Because
I like it.
He's such a physical freak. He's only going to get better technique as time goes on. So I think, most teams in the league would love to have them on their line. And nowadays, it used to be that left tackle was the tackle to be, and if you're a right tackle, it was kind of now I think both tackles are really important to have. So Spencer Brown is definitely going to be a key player for us. And then as far as Mitch Morse goes, I love him. I think he's going to be around for a couple more years, but just because he's had so many concussions, I wouldn't want to count him as a core player just because for his own health, I think if he's 1 or 2 injuries away from retiring, which would be the best decision for him. But, from the team's perspective, it might be time to start looking for somebody that can inherit the future center position.
See, for me, I wouldn't say Mitch Morse because, say this upcoming season goes by and let's say we, lose in the AFC Championship game again or something like that, right? It wouldn't be mind blowing to me that they're oh, okay, we're moving on from Mitch Morse after this season, right? I feel again, you alluded to he's up there in age, and the concussions, have been plentiful, and so it wouldn't be shocking to me if he wasn't with us for the long haul. It's kind of like a Cole Beasley, right? Excuse me. Do I love Cole Beasley? Absolutely. Do I appreciate everything he's done for this team? Absolutely. Would I be shocked if Cole Beasley if he's not here this upcoming season? No. And if you would have asked me this question 365 days ago, if you were would you be shocked if Cole Beasley isn't here after the 2021 season? I would say no, I'm not. He's older. And the offense is moving in really a different direction, to be honest. And he just doesn't fit the mold anymore necessarily. So I could see that potentially happening to a guy like Mitch Morse, although center is a little more universal than slot receiver. But I could definitely see him maybe hanging it up or anything. So I didn't mean to go into this big, soliloquy about Mitch Morse specifically, but thank you for your list, Brian.
Yeah. Buffalo Blitzkrieg made an excellent comment. You look in the draft this year to find somebody who can eventually replace Mitch Morse when the cap space starts becoming a problem. Because Mitch, I think when we signed him, he was definitely the highest paid center in the league. I don't know if he's still the highest or just
I don't know about
near
that.
the top. But yeah, that's going to become a problem later on as he gets older. So having somebody on a rookie deal who has a little bit of time to learn, and then eventually take over for him would be great.
100%. I don't think it's a. I'm sorry. What was the question you just asked? Anyway, all right. I totally lost my train of thought just that quick. It was like 2 seconds. Zach, who are your core players?
Well, I'm gonna start off with the usual suspects: Josh, Stefan, Deion Dawkins, because you always want that good pass protector. Spencer Brown, I agree with as well, because he's on a rookie deal. He's young, got the physicality, can learn technique. I mean, if Josh Allen has taught us anything, is that you can learn the technique as you go along. You can learn that stuff. You can't teach the physicality or the physical traits. I would say Dawson Knox is probably another really good year away from being a core. Like, he's right there.
Yeah, I think he has a little more to prove.
Yeah, and like, we know that Josh loves him. We know Josh loves Gabriel Davis. Again, those two guys are probably one full-blown great year away from being considered core pieces on the offense. And as for the defense, you got Trey, Poyer, Hyde. I would say Ed Oliver is getting up there too as a core piece, especially because on the defensive line, you kind of need that guy. And I think, again, even though he hasn't maybe produced the sack numbers a lot of people would like, Ed Oliver has done really well the last 2 years. And I think his future is just as bright as well.
Yeah, I would say Ed Oliver and Greg Rousseau both could be, because Greg Rousseau is already one of the best run defending edges in the league, and you can see he flashes the pass rushing skills sometimes. So he's got a little bit more to learn, but him and Ed, they could be a really frightening duo going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that to me it's a foregone conclusion that Oliver is a core piece. Excuse me. I would say that Dawson Knox is definitely a core piece as well. For you guys, I think I would flip Dawson Knox and Spencer Brown, right? I think Dawson Knox is definitely there. Spencer Brown is working his way into being that. I would need to see another season from him before I would, put him there. Interesting enough, there was a player I didn't hear from either one of you guys.
Oh, who's that?
Do either of you guys want to guess?
Was it Isaiah McKenzie?
No.
One of the linebackers?
Tremaine Edmonds. Now we have to get Tremaine Edmonds' opinions, because I don't even want to say might be, because I think he is most definitely the most polarizing player on his team.
Oh, absolutely,
yeah. Now that I think it's not really even close. So, Zach, what is your take on Tremaine Edmonds? I know a lot of people say it's like he's either garbage or he's a Hall of Famer. There's no middle ground. So, what's your take on it?
I think that obviously the comparisons to Brian Urlacher coming out didn't really help. The fact that he went to a team coached by the former defensive coordinator of the Panthers, who had Luke Kuechly in the middle for years, didn't help. And the fact that Brandon Beane traded up in the first round to get him did not help in setting realistic expectations for Tremaine Edmonds. But with that said, he has 2 Pro Bowl appearances. He's done really well. He's gotten relatively better. I think part of it was that I believe he was an outside linebacker in college, and then they moved him into the middle, so it took some time for him to adapt to that. He's basically like the play caller on the defense. He's a team captain, so there's a lot of respect for him in that locker room. So I don't want to say that he's the greatest linebacker out there, because he's not. He has a lot of room to improve. Like, to be fair, every time I watched him on defense, there was a lot of times where I saw he was kind of behind the pass coverage, or it seemed like he hesitated to fill a hole on run defense or something, or he had trouble getting off blocks. But I also got to remember that he's still better than a lot of other players out there. Otherwise, he wouldn't be starting for this team. He certainly wouldn't be a team captain. He wouldn't have made 2 Pro Bowls. Not that Pro Bowls mean as much as they did before, but that's a whole other thing. So I guess all this to say, he's above average, but he could still improve a bit. And I'm sure everyone's going to want him to improve a bit, especially because he's entering his 5th-year option year, which, again, is another thing that isn't his fault. R.E. Brandon Beane trading up in the first round to get him.
Mm-hmm. So Darius Leonard signed a contract, 5 years, $99 million, $52 million guaranteed. Essentially, he got a little more than $19 million a year, a little less than $100 a year, right? I mean, those are big numbers, so little is relative, but, just for the sake of putting them between, $19 million a year, right? Tremaine Edmonds says, I want $14 million a year. Brian, are you giving him that contract?
I think I probably would, depending on the structure of the contract. If it was more like front loaded with a way out after a couple of years,
that's always going to happen.
I think that's what they would do.
Yeah.
I feel like he's probably going to want a little bit more than that. That's the tricky part, because I think Tremaine is good enough that I'd like to keep him, but then you start thinking about the money and the fact that we already paid Matt Milano, who I think most of us would prefer to keep Matt Milano versus Tremaine Edmonds. So do you want to pay both of them, or do you want to try and draft somebody else? Now, linebackers now are getting a lot more athletic and better in pass coverage, so is it really worth it to pay 2 guys over $10 million a year when you can maybe replace Edmonds through the draft? So I think I probably would give him that $14 million a year, but that's like, I'm right on the edge of that. Core adjacent. Yeah. I think I like him more than most of the fan base. I think he has the dirtiest job on the team, just because he has to play sideline to sideline, and he doesn't get to make any of the sexy plays. And, he's not in deep coverage getting picks like Hyde, and he doesn't get sacks because they don't have him pass rush. He's just doing all the dirty work in the middle. So it's easy to look at him and be like, he's responsible for all these mistakes. And the running back gets 5 yards and Edmonds tackles him, but that's because other people didn't do their job, so Edmonds has to come and clean it up. So I think that's what he brings to the team, which is a nice aspect to have, but he does need to keep improving on like pass coverage and maybe show some more talent in blitzing if he does want to get a payday.
Yeah, I think he's going to get a payday regardless. From somebody's going to pay him. I would like to hope that, he could stay in Buffalo for a reasonable price, or unless he balls the hell out this year, then okay, then get your money. But, I thought he was going to do that this year or like this last coming year. So I was a little disappointed. Like, it was like, oh, okay. No, I mean, I spent so much of like the preseason and beginning of the season, like defending him. And then it was kind of like seeing the year he had, it was like, I was kind of underwhelming. It wasn't like bad, but it was like, I kind of see what people saying. It's like, he's not amazing, but he's not like bad either. So I do like Tremaine Edmonds. I would like him to stay because I do think he can develop into a really good linebacker. Great. We'll see. A really good linebacker. I think he can be. But let's get into a player who we know is not going to be a core player. Now the Buffalo Bills has given Cole Beasley permission to seek a trade. What does this mean for the Bills offense, Zach?
It means they're going to have to find another receiver because Cole Beasley, he was a great slot receiver. He's a really good route runner. That's probably his best attribute. Obviously, the fact that he still had 82 receptions last year, I think. I heard he had 82 receptions back-to-back years, so he was still part of the offense. But what was different was that Dawson Knox got more involved. Gabriel Davis came on late after Emmanuel Sanders fell off. I think it's getting to the point where you kind of knew, especially based on his cap hit, there was going to be something that had to be done about Cole Beasley. And again, if he had accepted the alleged restructure offer that was probably brought before they let him seek a trade, I'm assuming that's probably how it went. They were like, hey, would you mind taking a pay cut? And he said no. And they're like, okay, you can go look for a trade then, because they're not going to let him stay on the roster for that kind of money.
Yeah.
But, and as hard as it is to lose good players, you look at the New England Patriots during their dynasty, Bill Belichick was not afraid to let a Richard Seymour or a Mike Vrabel go a year too early. Like, you just
get rid of them a year early rather than a year late is what they always said.
Exactly. You got to be willing to make an unpopular move for the good of the team and for the good of the franchise going forward. And again, it's just Cole Beasley's not getting any younger. He's still a good receiver. I still think he'll do well next year wherever he ends up. But, the Bills just got to move forward. You got Gabriel Davis, who's probably going to be your wide receiver too. Dawson Knox is coming into his own as a tight end. There's still plenty of options. You could even bring back Isaiah McKenzie, maybe give him a tryout in that slot receiver role, like he's shown flashes of the last couple of years. Maybe you go out in free agency, bring someone else in, maybe like blanking on who are available at wide receiver that could play a slot, but maybe like James Washington from the Steelers, take a flyer on him.
I like
bring in
James
some
Washington.
Competition. Maybe you go into the draft and you take a Jamison Williams or a Treylon Burks or a Christian Watson, or it's a really deep receiver class. So that could be another way to go. You draft another cheap receiver or two, let them battle it out. And you just use that financial capital elsewhere on defense, maybe at CB2, try to get an upgrade there. Maybe you go after a better upgrade at veteran pass rusher or something. Like, you can do a lot with $6 point whatever million that Beasley was set to count against the cap. So obviously it's just a matter of when he's gone at this point, based on the fact that they let him seek a trade.
Yeah. Brian, if you're Brandon Beane, how are you replacing Cole Beasley's production on the football field?
So I would be looking at getting a cheaper mid-end slot receiver free agent like Jamison Crowder, maybe. Let's see, there's a couple other guys.
I like Brian Pringle.
Byron Pringle is one that gets a lot of attention. Then I would draft somebody for sure. It could even be in the first round if one of those guys falls. I know a lot of fans don't like the idea of drafting a wide receiver in the first round, but personally, I love the thought of having 3 young wide receivers who are all teamed up with Josh and all on longer contracts, so they're all building chemistry together and working it out. I think that was a big part of Patrick Mahomes' success in Kansas City, was just stepping into an offense that was already young and together and clicking with each other. So if you get Garrett Wilson or something, or Calvin Austin on day 2, something like that would, I think, be really great.
Yeah, and to your point, you also get 3 superstars on one offense.
Yeah.
I think a big deal is made out of Stephon Diggs, getting shut down, right? But I mean, as a result of him getting shut down, another receiver had 207 yards. So I mean, we could just like, it's I feel like it's just as productive essentially. Like maybe you didn't get the statistics, but it's either way you still help the team win. So now if I say, we know they weren't doubling Cole Beasley. I love Cole, but like, he wasn't getting doubled. And maybe you bring in a wide receiver who, can, beat one-on-one coverage consistently. Now you have to focus on either this man or Stephon Diggs. You also have to be accountable for Josh Allen, scrambling and using his legs. Now you also have to be accountable for Gabriel Davis and Dawson Knox is coming to his own. I just feel like that extra, we don't necessarily need it to win a championship. No, we don't need it. I don't think. I think we could win a championship without it. But I feel like to have it, why the hell not? Like,
yeah, it would certainly help.
Yeah, absolutely. I allude to all the time. Look, Patrick Mahomes is 1B in terms of the best quarterback in the NFL, right? If Josh Allen is on a different planet somewhere, Patrick Mahomes is on that planet with him. Okay. I do fully believe that Josh Allen is the most talented quarterback in the NFL, but Patrick Mahomes is like right there. Okay. Like he's still a special talent, but you give him the fastest man in the NFL and a genius at the tight end position, that obviously helps him. It's not like, oh, that's a hindrance. You know what I mean? So I think more talent, more raw ability would, have better results. And I think that's something people don't necessarily maybe care for. Like, when I mentioned that to people, they're more so like, well, Josh Allen makes wide receivers better. That is true and a very good point. I could use that as a point as well, because now if I have a first round talent at the wide receiver position,
if you have a great wide receiver, he gets even better.
Thank you. Exactly. So, I just feel like I don't see what the downfall would be in that. Like, we already have a really good defense. Like, our defense is good to the point where, like, we could probably win a championship even if we didn't have a great defense. Like, that's how good our offense is, right? But we do have a great defense, a really good defense. That great word I'm not ready to use, right? We have a really good defense. So even if we had to sacrifice just a wee teensy little bit on a defensive end to not go get, a first round corner or a first round edge or, defensive tackle or whatever the case may be, if we sacrifice that and use it on a wide receiver, I believe it gives us just that much edge, over the competition. On top of having a good defense, we'll just have that much better of an offense. So, I mean, the idea is to score points, so I think that would work out. What do you think, would be, how do you see the, the benefits versus, negatives to having a first round wide receiver, Zach?
Well, I think a wise man once said, you don't want to lose your fastball. And the best way to do that, especially with this current team, with this offense, is to get another receiver, another good receiving threat for Josh Allen. And I think that this receiver class, based on how deep it is and how talented it is and how fast it is too, like, again, we were talking earlier about the 40 times going on in Indy. Like, seriously, what's going on with that? There's so many fast wide receivers there. It's like going to a dog park and just seeing all the zoomies going on, right? There's just so many fast receivers there. And especially if you could get someone with that good blend of
I'm so sorry.
speed and size. Like, I know there's a few of those out there. Usually it's really hard to find, but again, it seems like the NFL is now becoming more of an athlete league. So you get more athletic receivers. The bigger receivers are trying to get faster as well. I think you couldn't even go wrong with getting, like, again, Treylon Burks or Christian Watson, a couple of those, one of those big receivers that maybe allows you to get scheme fluid a little. Maybe you move Gabriel Davis into a big slot. Maybe you put whoever that is in the slot. Maybe you put Stephon Diggs in the slot. If you can get some variants like that,
that would be
moving
epic.
chess pieces around.
Yeah,
It makes it so much better and so much It would be so much better for Ken Dorsey to scheme, so much better for Josh Allen to perform, and better for the receivers too, because you're not just in one spot all the time. It's not as predictable. So if Brandon Beane feels like at 25, or even if he feels like he sees at number 20 that someone's available and he wants to leapfrog a couple teams, if he trades up for a receiver, I would not be mad. Honestly, I would actually be very happy with that.
Me too. I have to say the thought of seeing a Garrett Wilson, on the left side, a Gabriel Davis, to Josh's right, and then Stephon Diggs in the slot. That is disgusting. All right, I don't know if there's a defense in the NFL that can stop that. To be quite honest with you, and I only say that because, sure, there's a defense that could defend 3 good wide receivers, but now have Josh Allen at the quarterback. You know what I mean? And that is a whole brand new ball game. But now it is time for our segment of What Does Vince Think? Obviously, you guys know Vince Taylor. He was a podcaster. He isn't podcasting anymore, but it's my man, and I want to incorporate him into the show. So I like to get his opinion on topics. And since tonight's topics were who are the core players, Vince is going to give us his opinion on that.
I think what I want to do here is refrain from saying Josh Allen. He's the most logical and easy choice there is to make. Josh Allen is the future, and he is obviously a core player. But in the interest of making better conversation, I think what I'm going to do is give you one on offense and one on defense. And the way I'm going to go on offense is, and we can talk about offensive line and we can talk about running backs, but I think during the course of Josh's career and in the next few years, some of those parts are going to be replaceable. And the same goes for wide receivers outside of Stephon Diggs. We're already talking about Cole Beasley, may or may not be back. Looks like he's not. Isaiah McKenzie may or may not be back. Looks like he's not. Gabe Davis is a nice piece. He is on a rookie deal, and I'm very excited about Gabe Davis. But I think the slots and the wide receiver number 2 are going to be secondary pieces because of the growth of Dawson Knox. And that's not to say that they're not going to be important pieces. I'm just trying to pick one player. But I think Dawson Knox takes a lot of pressure off those guys. And if he's taking another step, which I believe he has in him, I do. I think it was disappointing this year with the hand injury. And having a guy like Dawson Knox on the field as a tight end does force the defense to look at other players and not focus on a slot receiver or a wide receiver too. It's just another player out there that I think you have to think about. And Dawson Knox is, to my opinion, and I'm unbiased as anybody, I think Dawson Knox is in that top 5 to 7 range of tight ends, and he has another step in him, which is amazing to think about, pairing him with Josh Allen for many years to come to take pressure off those other wide receivers. Now in defense, I think there's a lot of easy answers, and I don't necessarily think that there's a wrong one. I know how much we love our secondary. Levi Wallace is gone. You could talk about Trey White coming back from his injury, and that's definitely one I've thought about. I don't think I want to pick the safeties because, well, they're older, and I think they probably have 2 or 3 more years of elite level play left in them. Where am I going to go? I'm going to go with Ed Oliver. I think Ed Oliver has a step left in him as well. I think, he's been in the league for a few years now, and we see flashes where he just is dominant. And for size, and I think he's got another gear to give as well. And he can be a game wrecker. We've seen it before. He's a core piece of this interior line, especially since we've invested so heavily in it. We have guys like Gru. We have guys like Epineza. We have guys like Boogie Basham. We have these players that we just feel like we're waiting to develop. And the key to getting there, I think, is having pressure somewhere else on the line. And that's where Ed Oliver is going to come in. So I'm not even upset if you take Gregory Rousseau. He's was a fine rookie season, but I think it let some of us down. And part of that reason could be because of the rotation. But I'm going to go with Ed Oliver. And on the offense, Dawson Knox.
Thank you so much, Vince Taylor, for taking your time and giving us your thoughts. So I think it was a unanimous between the four of us. Ed Oliver was one of the core players, right? Dawson Knox was not a unanimous decision. So I will ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, let's say 10 is how comfortable we are naming these guys a core player, i.e. Josh Allen or Stephon Diggs, right? A 1 is Vernon Butler. Okay. On a scale from 1 to 10, where is Dawson Knox on your he's a core player scale, Brian?
I'd probably put him at like a 7. I think I want to see another season at this level before I really call him a core player. Just because he has had on and off issues with consistency and dropping the ball, and as defenses get this year of film, which is clearly his best year, they're going to look at that and try and find different ways to shut him down and maybe interfere with him, because they're not going to get flagged for that, but interfere with them and break up passes and stuff like that. So if he can keep playing at this level, I absolutely think he'll be a core player going forward. I'd like to see more of this first.
Need to see a little bit more. Zach, on a scale of 1 to 10, where's Dawson Knox for you?
I have to agree with Brian, a 7. Again, he had a great year last year. Everyone's been saying that he could get to that point. He's almost there. Again, as like Brian said too, I would like to see one more year of that. And I'm sure that by halfway through next year, I'll probably already be saying, oh, well, he's already had that year. So
hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think he's very close to being a core player. Again, it's just about the consistency of the production, which started actually tail end of last season, or 2020 season is when this all started. So he's gotten there, not quite there, but I'm very optimistic.
Me too. I think I would put him there, but that just may be a little biased because I've been saying since his second season, this is going to be the season Dawson Knox is going to break out. And finally, he semi did it this year. And so I took that as a W. I think, if I'm not mistaken, all of us here are under 30, correct?
Just barely.
So yeah, me too. 27. I'm almost there. I'm looking directly at it. But so with that being said, none of us have really experienced too many winning seasons as Buffalo Bills fans, right? As Bills fans, do you think we have gotten maybe a little too much too fast in terms of success? And do you think it's gotten to a point that we're ungrateful as fans for what we have been given these last 5 years? Such a rapid turnaround. Would you say is just a fandom in us, or would you say we're kind of spoiled brats? That
I wouldn't say that every Bills fan has been spoiled by these past 5 years. I would say, because I know there has been a lot of chatter ever since the Bills season ended about McDermott and Frazier, and whether or not they're responsible for how it ended, and whether or not certain people should have been fired as accountability for that. I wouldn't say that we're spoiled by it. I'd say for most of it is the fact that over the past 20 plus years is that Bills fans have known nothing but real sheer disappointment, and like any glimmer of hope ended up just being snuffed out almost immediately. So it's sort of that innate habit to automatically assume the worst and go to the worst case scenario and blow it all out of proportion.
mm-hmm.
Because if anyone truly believes that Sean McDermott deserved to be fired after that game, they're not a Bills fan. Like, get out of here with that. That's not true. That is ridiculous. And everyone, you need to remember too, Andy Reid. Everyone talks about him being a legendary head coach, being amazing and all that. It helps that he had Patrick Mahomes, yes. But he went almost 2 decades, choking in the playoffs, not making Super Bowls. He lost the Super Bowl appearance with Philly. It took him going to Kansas City, getting Patrick Mahomes, getting that offense, getting that team to get over the hump and learn from his mistakes. And when I tweeted that, like tweeted about that a few days after the season ended, people were going at me saying stuff like, well, we don't have 20 years and stuff like that. It's like, that's not the point.
Right.
The point is, it may take a little time.
Yeah.
You just got to be patient. And I understand, again, all the traumatic flashbacks to all those mediocre seasons, all the terrible seasons, the drought. It all comes back when anything disappointing happens. But you just got to remember, this is not them. This is a different team. The old Bills would never have come back, rebounded against the Rams a couple years ago when they gave up that huge lead.
That's true. Yeah.
They never, I think Chris Trapasso tweeted out recently, he said that was the moment it switched. That was the turning point where we were not those old Bills anymore, and this is a new team. So you just got to remember, for anyone who still thinks that McDermott's a bum because of 13 seconds at the end of the game, patience. Remember, this isn't 20 years ago. This isn't 2005. This is 2022. It's a different team. We have a franchise quarterback. We don't have to worry about that anymore. We don't have to look in the draft, in the combine for quarterbacks anymore. You just look at him and say, oh, cool. Some other team he'll be nice on some other team.
Yeah.
Just relax.
Yeah. And to your point, I also have to tell people sometimes, they're like, oh, Sean McDermott got out-coached by Andy Reid. What a bum. What a hack. We need a guy who can win the Super Bowl. It's like, yo, like, chill. Like, again, Andy Reid's been doing this for 2 decades. Sean McDermott is in his 5th season as a head coach. He is in his, like, he is, all of this is just as new of course, he was in the NFL. He's been in Super Bowls. He's coached Super Bowls, etc. Right? But being the head guy, he's just as new to this as Josh Allen is to being a starting quarterback down there. Like, he had 1 season extra, right? He's just new to this as us Bills fans are winning, period, right? You know what I mean? So, like, just give him a break. He's going to get it together. I mean, he already got it together. He got us together. So I can only imagine that he's just going to, get better with time. And, it's kind of, I mean, people are wow. Anyway, Brian, do you think those fans are crybabies, or do you?
I think there are. Anytime you have some success, there are going to be some bandwagon guys that hop on, and as soon as you don't win, they get mad about it. But I think for the most part, it's just probably the Patriots dynasty has messed with the way that people think about teams now, where they think it's just, you flip a switch and it's dynasty Super Bowl time now. It's not really how it works, though, unfortunately. So I'm happy going to the playoffs every year. When you get to the playoffs, crazy stuff happens, as we've seen. It can be crazy good and crazy bad. Sean McDermott's going to get there eventually. So, yeah, I think people are just being a little melodramatic because it was a painful loss, and he did make a mistake somewhere. Something happened with the coaching staff that got screwed up and lost the game. But that doesn't mean that he should be fired. It doesn't mean that he's a bum. People just have to take it in stride, and we'll be back next year to try again.
Now, as much as people have said Sean McDermott should be fired and Sean McDermott's a bum, it's been even worse for Mr. Leslie Frazier. Speaking of Leslie Frazier, my guy, Brian from Breaking Tables podcast, he says Frazier is on his last leg. He also says if Bean doesn't do his wizard shit for defense in the first round, I'll be a crybaby and melodramatic. So, Brian, let's get thoughts on Leslie Frazier. Let's start with Brian.
Yeah, I think Leslie Frazier did show that his defense is really smart for elevating guys who are like lower level players and getting them to play at a high level. But I think Kansas City showed that it definitely has its limits. Is he on his last leg? I don't know. He doesn't coach the kind of defense that I really like. I was always in love with Jim Schwartz.
Yeah.
Having those two stud edge rushers, and then everybody's running man coverage on the back end. Frazier doesn't do that. I think he needs to incorporate more man coverage into the defense when you're facing elite quarterbacks like Mahomes. If you just keep bringing zone at them, they're gonna figure it out. Like Tom Brady you can't run zone coverage all day against Tom Brady. He's gonna just figure that out, that's how we lost to the Buccaneers in the end. So I do think there are some areas where maybe he's just too entrenched in his ways, or maybe it's just a thing with the personnel and they can work it out. I'm willing to give him another chance personally, but yeah, I wouldn't be upset if the defense messes up again this year if we moved on from him after that. But I'd like to see another year out of him.
Do you think he has the requisite defensive line to be able to be successful in the same way Jim Schwartz was?
Yeah, that's been a big part of it. He has not so far, but also he's been around since 2018, close to the beginning. So he's
2017.
Yeah, 2017, 2018. So he's had his hands in all of these decisions too. So,
that's fair.
I think he deserves some of the responsibility of the defensive line. They've put a ton of money into, and it still kind of seems like it's only a halfway complete project. So
that's fair. What are your thoughts on Leslie Frazier, Zach?
I do think that, again, while I said that Sean McDermott doesn't deserve to be on the hot seat at all, and he won't be because he got an extension, he and Bean are here for the long haul. Frazier, I could understand people wanting Frazier on a hot seat next year. I mean, I think we've already kind of mentioned just the way the defense has performed. It was good last year. Not as good when compared to the Chiefs offense, like we saw in the divisional game. They just ran all over them, and it seemed like there wasn't weren't many adjustments made in that game. And what was especially astounding about it was the fact that earlier in the season on that Sunday Night Football game, it seemed like everything went right for the Bills defense. And it was like, well, why didn't you do the same thing in the divisional round? Like, what exactly happened that was different besides Tre'Davious White being out? What was the big difference? Like, what exactly happened? And I will say, too, the mainly zone coverage defense, I understand that's the scheme that they go with. It does also irritate me when I see corners lining up 10 yards away from the receiver on 3rd and 5.
Yeah.
And when you see other teams succeed against Tyreek Hill, and I think they even did it again earlier in the season. Line someone up right on him, jam him at the line. You throw him off his route, off his rhythm, and you can neutralize him or limit him at least. Mm-hmm. And that's how they won during the season. They made Mahomes, Kelsey, and Hill look above average, which for their skyrocketed expectations and their ceiling is really bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like the fact that they couldn't do that in the most important game of the season, it does befuddle me a bit. It's like, what happened? What changed between that game in the regular season and the divisional round that made you change your philosophy or forget what worked? But obviously, it is what it is. It happened. You got to look forward. This year, I think a lot of fans are hoping that Frazier, I should say, and McDermott to a degree, because he is, defensive minded, he gets his thoughts in on that side of the ball, that they maybe evolve their defensive philosophy a little. Obviously, that may also depend on what they do in free agency and the draft, too, what's available to them. If they can evolve their scheme a bit, maybe introduce more man coverage, it would be nice. You'd have to find some corners that are better at man coverage, or at least proficient at it, to a degree that they could keep up. And again, maybe you go into the draft and you find a quick corner, someone with speed, to maybe try to keep up in a track race with Tyreek Hill, because Bills clearly need that if they want to beat the Chiefs. But it all comes down to, again, at the end of the day, though, the buck always stops at the top. So the blame or the credit will always fall on the defensive play caller. And I'm pretty sure that is just Leslie Frazier's defense, because McDermott has always given him the praise. So he naturally does deserve the blame. And in that sense, this may very well be a make or break year. So I could agree, again, with him being on the hot seat this year.
I don't disagree with anything you guys said, right? For me, I kind of look at Leslie Frazier in a different way, right? So for me, I'm really big at like net value, right? It's like how much better is it than it is bad, or how much worse is it than it is good, right? And I say, all right, let me take a look at Leslie Frazier and what he brings to the table. Now, we have Brian alluded to it earlier, guys who maybe aren't necessarily super talented, but they play far above their class under Leslie Frazier. And I say, all right, he doesn't have like a group of just like ultra talented guys, right? These guys are, from slightly below average to, I would say, one great defensive player right now, which is Tre'Davious White. I would say the safeties are great. And then everybody else is maybe above average at best, right? And I think that, obviously you are have the number one defense in the NFL, meaning you're limiting points, right? That's my big thing. He doesn't let anybody score deep, and he limits points, right? So even if you are able to move the ball, it's perfectly fine. You get into this red zone, you're kicking a field goal, okay? And now if I have Josh Allen on the other side of the football field, I'm fine with that, right? So I look at what Leslie Frazier does, and I'm like, well, he has these guys playing better than what they are. They're all playing together. They all love each other. They're hyped, and they're making plays, they're creating turnovers, and they're doing all this stuff with. I think I would think that if a lesser coach was coaching this defense, these guys would probably be like 14th, 15th in defense. I could see that with this roster, right? But he's still limiting everything, points, yards, etc. And when I have a defense that I say this, but and I know this is how all teams are supposed to work, but it's literally how the Bills are set up. Is the defense is set up to limit points. You could move the ball as much as you want in terms of yardage, but points you're gonna get as few as we can possibly manage, right? And then the offense is set up to score points and move the ball at a rapid pace, right? Going down the field in 4 plays, scoring touchdown, whatever. And I like that combination. I would much rather have a Leslie Frazier who is, not letting anybody go deep and is holding people to field goals, when I have a guy like Josh Allen who's going to come and typically he's going to score touchdowns. So when I look at that, I look at, again, it's the net value, right? Complementary football says if Josh Allen scores a touchdown and the defense holds the team to a field goal and Josh Allen goes down and scores another touchdown, now you have to throw at our number one secondary in the NFL. And that's going to be a problem for you. unless you're Patrick Mahomes. But so I'm okay with that. And one thing that I did say was if I'm this team, I say if we have a game record on defense, I think this season looks totally different. Because how many times have we seen, a quarterback standing in the pocket with no one to throw the ball to? The only problem is he's standing there forever, and eventually somebody comes open. Now if you have I don't know, a Keem Nicks or like a Calais Campbell or Von Miller or anybody really, if they can just wreak havoc, the quarterback doesn't have that much time to stand there. And now he has a limited amount of time. He has, to worry about somebody breathing down his neck, and it's going to fluster him. Meanwhile, he's throwing at the number one secondary in the NFL. So long story short, I see the value in Leslie Frazier. I really like Leslie Frazier. I really like what he does. Now I know that I think maybe a little differently, and I see the game maybe a little differently than most people. But I don't like blame anybody for saying, Leslie Frazier should be fired or anything. Like that game was just, it was pathetic to watch, honestly, the second half. Like, I don't really want to get into it, but people say, "Oh, Patrick Mahomes went crazy." No, Tyreek Hill went crazy the second half. Tyreek Hill did everything, and then Travis Kelce also did his thing as well. But that game, the Colts game, there's a few games where it's just like, yo, what the hell? Like, Leslie, come on now. But then again, there's games like, the Jaguars game, where we scored 6 points and Brian Daboll just got a job. So now you're telling me Leslie Frazier needs to be fired? You know what I mean? Like that contrast is a little too steep for me personally. You know what I mean? Again, maybe I am a little bit of a Leslie Frazier enthusiast or apologist or whatever the case may be. But I think that if he had a legit pass rusher, which Greg Rousseau could possibly become, I thought AJ Epinesa was becoming this year because the way he started in preseason was absolutely dominant. But we'll see what happens.
Kind of fell off a little.
Yeah, he did. Like, what do you think of our young pass rushers, Brian? Like, what do you think we can expect from those guys going forward?
Yeah, I think I do like Epinesa and Boogie. Epinesa, like we saw with Ed Oliver, sometimes you need a couple years to learn all those skills, and then year 3 comes around and you play a lot better. So that's what I'm hoping for. I'm not going to assume that's going to happen, so I do think we should still add somebody else in the draft. And like you said, sign. There's actually usually free agency is really hard for edge rushers. This year, actually, I think is pretty good because there's a lot of veteran guys who, like you said, Von Miller, Chandler Jones, a few other guys.
Jr.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is the year that you can really open up the wallet and sign a top-end pass rusher to go opposite Greg Rousseau, and then you get those two guys squishing the quarterback in the pocket. I do think that's an area that they need to bring more consistently because they get pressure, which is great, but you got to start finishing those and really, make the quarterback either make some bad decisions or take some sacks.
100%. And I think that was the problem. I think we were one of the top teams in pressure, if I'm not mistaken. It was just couldn't get to the quarterback.
Which is good. Pressure is great. The thing is, nowadays, quarterbacks are all so mobile that, you get pressure on a guy like Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or something, and they're just going to say bye and run out of the pocket and run for a first down or something, and then you haven't really helped yourself at all.
Exactly. And exactly, like, the divisional game, that first Chiefs drive, Patrick Mahomes basically ran the ball down the field by himself.
For the field.
Like our secondary was amazing in that first drive. And it was just like nobody could get to the quarterback. And he just tiptoed his way down the field he could, so that's where my thought process comes in. What about you, Zach? What do you think, of this young defensive front?
I think there is potential. Like we said before, Ed Oliver is coming into his own. He can wreak havoc. Harrison Phillips had a great 6-game stretch at the end of the year. He's coming in. I think the Bills need to bring back because he's finally fully recovering from that ACL injury, and he's showing why McDermott drafted him, why he stuck with him. And obviously Justin Zimmer will come back at some point next year, which should definitely help with the Mahomes running down the field thing, considering that Zimmer, kept up with Tyreek Hill in the conference championship game last year. But also, it wouldn't hurt to also draft or sign another defensive lineman with some athleticism. Maybe, again, draft Travis Jones, who has that blend of big size for a one tech and also apparently has some speed to him and agility, quickness, some fluidity, as my dad said when he was watching the combine. Looked pretty good in those defensive line drills. If you could get someone like that, maybe it helps you shore up the run D and in pass rush situations too, like against the athletic quarterbacks. Obviously, Groot has the potential. He showed it. I think he exceeded my expectations for this year. I wasn't expecting him to do much this year. I thought Epinesa would have done more, but I think we can at least say you could get 2 quality games out of Epinesa, both against Miami, because Austin Jackson. But
Both against Austin Jackson, yeah.
that's at the very least, you're going to get 2 good games out of him if he's going up against Austin Jackson. But I do believe that they do need to get another edge rusher. I like Jerry Hughes. I think a lot of Bills fans like Jerry Hughes, but I don't know if he's really the answer at this point. Like, maybe if you could get him on a cheap enough deal, you bring him back for 1 more year, see if they can make a run, get him a ring before he moves on. But I think, again, you might need to look at the higher tier options, the Von Millers, the Chandler Jones, possibly DeMarcus Lawrence if Dallas doesn't screw that up. Because I heard that they were asking him to take a pay cut, and
Yeah, I think they're going to let him go.
Like, there's another guy, another premier edge rusher. So this year might actually be the year where Brandon Beane's like, you know what? Here's the Brinks truck. Let's get a pass rusher. And I would, again, that would be something I'd be all for because this team is so close. It may only take a couple different pieces. And also, who knows? Maybe the thing that is keeping the Bills from doing a true starting defensive line front might be they don't have a bona fide pass rusher or a top tier guy. And that might be why they were doing the rotation so heavily. I don't know. It's something to think about, but I think that the defensive line, it's decent. It got better over the last couple of years, but there's still a lot of ways to go. And I think they could take a giant leap if you get the right pieces this offseason.
Oh, your mic's turned off, Justus.
Sorry about that. So last week on the show, like my mic wasn't working and I ended up yelling. You couldn't hear me, right? So there's this thing where like my mic, I can press the button and it turns red. It means it's supposed to stop talking, stop all audio. And when I press it, it turns green, means you can talk. So last week I was on the show and I pressed the button and, I'm yelling, to my fiance, I'm screaming her name, and like in some reason the mic, picked up everything and I screamed right into Jake Jordan's ear and it was hilarious. Like Vince even made a little clip about it. It was hilarious. But yeah. So before we get out of here, I want to ask you guys, before we get to final thoughts, and then get out of here, I want to ask you guys, draft one, start one. Draft one, sign one, right? So cornerback, defensive end. Would you rather have that veteran experience in the cornerback room, defensive end room, or would you rather have that, that young energy in your cornerback or defensive room and vice versa? Zach, let's start with you.
Well, this is actually going to be a pretty difficult decision for me because I know I just talked about how the Bills should probably try to get a premier edge rusher in free agency and stuff. But on the other hand, you think about the cornerback room, you probably won't get Tre'Davious White back until, I believe, maybe about November. I
Yeah,
know
that's what I was
that
thinking too.
over my guy, Thigh Doctor, has been very on top of all the medical stuff, and I think he said early November, maybe from the torn ACL, based on when he had the surgery and that. So you're gonna miss your shutdown corner for a significant portion of the season, and I don't
You
know,
don't want a
maybe
rookie out there.
yeah, you don't. I don't know if you necessarily want, unless it's the right type of rookie player, or I'm not sure. Again, I haven't done as much research into cornerbacks as I probably should have already, but
I'm sure you will.
we'll
Someday. The
see.
combine just started.
Yeah,
He's-
I'm not sure if you want a rookie corner being your CB1 starting this year, or worst case too is like, nothing against Dane Jackson, but do you feel comfortable with Dane Jackson as a CB2 for 10 to 12 weeks of the season? Like, again, we were talking about Leslie Frazier does, make average players play a lot better.
Mhm.
And Dane Jackson did play solid when Trey White went down. He and Levi, they held their own. But we also saw what happened in that divisional game with Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace against Tyreek Hill, Kelsey, that offense. And I don't know if I'd be fully comfortable with the status quo at corner minus Trey White injured. So maybe I guess I just talked myself into saying sign corner, draft defensive end. But I think you could also make a legitimate argument the other way around as well.
I know. I wanted to stomp you guys. That's why I tried to give you a tough question. Oh, Lord. All right, my headphones came out. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think the real answer to that question is both. But just for the thought exercise, I'll say sign a defensive end in free agency so you can get. This is like a weirdly good year for free agent edge rushers, so you might as well take advantage of it while you can. And then get one of these crazy athletic cornerbacks that are showing up in the draft. And this coaching staff pretty much specializes in defensive backs, so you might as well give him a rookie defensive back with really high ceiling and let him coach him up to that. I feel more confident in our coaches to develop a rookie cornerback than I do a rookie edge rusher. Not that they've had some success with edge rushers, but they're like really, really good with defensive backs. So I think that would be the way to do it.
Yeah, at first, when I first thought about it, I was with Zach. But then I thought about it and pretty much the same reasons Brian gave. I ended up switching to that because I'm thinking like, all right, who was our last young cornerback? Obviously, Levi Wallace was an undrafted free agent. He ended up becoming CB2 for an extended period of time. Dane Jackson, 6th, 7th rounder, CB2 for an extended period of time. Tre'Davious White, obviously he's a first rounder, but he is now one of the best cornerbacks in the league, right? So I feel like we can, and our safety tandem is absolutely nuts. So I'm very confident in our ability to develop a defensive back, to draft them there, get a high quality talent, maybe in the first or second round, develop them there. And then I was thinking like, if there was one area of the Buffalo Bills who I have absolutely no trust in that group being developed correctly, it's the defensive line. Ed Oliver looks good, but then again, Ed Oliver was projected to be the number 1 pick in the draft. He came out, so like Ed Oliver was going to be good either way. So, because some people could say, Harrison Phillips looks good. But outside of that, nobody else has really like stepped up to look like excellent outside of what they were expected. So I feel like if we got a guy who, has been around the block, is a freak, a game wrecker, who can just go in there and just wreak havoc. He can, coach up the younger guys with those, explosive traits, like your Greg Russo's and your AJ Epinesa, and he can, help those guys develop into, even better players. And meanwhile, you have a Tre'Davious White and Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer to help, a cornerback develop into, the player that he would eventually become. And so I'm really hoping that we're able to sign a defensive end to just get a guy who we already know can do it, and then the cornerback, I'm a little more, I feel like we have a little more cushion with corner, only because Tre'Davious White will be coming back at some point, and he's, cornerback one bar none, right? And then, let's say, I don't think we'll re-sign Levi Wallace, but let's say we do. Now we have a CB2. We have one of the best slots in the league at Taron Johnson, and then we also have Dane Jackson. It's kind of like the cornerback room will get full, bringing in that other, draft pick to come in and try to get, into the rotation. So then I say, I would rather have a situation where we can have a young guy come in and, work with those guys and, help out our secondary a little bit, as opposed to a defensive end. And it looks like we lost Zach. I don't know what happened, but yeah. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say on that anyway. But we can get into final thoughts. So Brian, you have been on my show before. I don't know if you have done final thoughts, but final thoughts is essentially just talk about anything that's on your heart. Doesn't necessarily have to be Bills football, though most people just do Bills football. It could be whatever you want to talk about. So, what are your final thoughts, Brian?
Okay, well, since it's in the beginning of the NFL offseason, I guess I'll give a plug to the Canadian Football League. That's going to be starting up, I think, in just under 90 days now. So if you want to watch some summer football, it's always a delight. I got lots of good Canadian friends from interacting with some of the CFL people on Twitter and on the CFL Reddit. They're great people and excited fans, and the league is teetering on the brink of destruction. So if you want to watch a game, that would definitely help them. I think they're on like ESPN2, ESPN3, that kind of stuff. So if you already have ESPN, you won't even have to pay anything.
Is it because of COVID, or is it, just working in that direction?
Canadian football has a very old fan base, and for a while now, it's been having trouble getting young people interested in football. So also, I think people nowadays, it's pretty easy to watch the NFL. So I think a lot of people have gravitated towards that. But Canadian football is kind of fun because it's weird. All the rules are different. They only have 3 downs instead of 4. If you kick a punt for a touchback, you get a point. Crazy stuff like that. They have wide receivers can motion forward before the snap, so you'll see them run forward. Yeah.
Oh, I would have to get used to it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Okay, I know there's like goalposts in the middle of the end zone and everything.
Yeah, people run into the goalpost. It's crazy.
It's funny. All right, yeah, I'm definitely have to check all that out. USFL, XFL, CFL, all that. I gotta have my football fix while we wait for Josh in the game to get back on the field.
Yeah, I need some football to occupy the time when there's not football.
100%, absolutely. I'm right there with you. I'm not sure what happened to Zach, but I mean, we're here at the end anyway, so you guys know Zach, so go follow Zach and everything. But I want to thank Brian and Zach for both coming through. Appreciate you guys. You guys are some of the guys who I started in this whole Twitter thing universe with, and you were super cool to me. And the first time I had you on my podcast, it was a blast. And with me not working with Built in Buffalo anymore, I have more opportunity to reach out to more people and and more time on my hands. So thank you. Appreciate
it's been
you,
cool
man.
to see how your show has grown over the past year, really, because you just started
Yeah.
like last year. So
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
yeah, thanks for having me.
You got to get a show, honestly, man. You got a lot of opinions that people like and respect, man.
Yeah, I don't know if I have enough time to do podcasting myself. I do like coming on though, and I love arguing with people on Twitter. So
Yeah, I don't think people like arguing with you very much, but it is funny to watch you just absolutely obliterate people on the timeline. But thank you, Brian Alverson, excuse me, for coming through. Zach Vaughn, editor-in-chief for Buffalo Fanatics, not Buffalo Rumblings. Sorry about that, Zach. Thank you guys for tuning in to Justice for All. You guys can check us out on Breakdown Buffalo channel, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all the great stuff. Follow Reddit Bills, top 10 Bills account on the app, and I swear to goodness, there's no exaggeration. Make sure you guys follow Zach Vaughn as well, and you can follow me at Justice General. And thank you guys for tuning in to Justice for All. We are out. Go Bills.